federal government, for a more efficient federal government. We spend a little over $6 trillion a year, as Senator Sanders so eloquently pointed out. When you spend $6 trillion a year, somebody's getting $6 trillion a year. Every penny in our budget has a constituency, and that constituency will fight us. They will fight us. And I recognize that, and it's something that, as we go about downsizing government, we have to be mindful of. However, there is one constituency that is not going to be able to fight us in our quest to scrutinize federal spending, and I'm referring to dead people. And that's what I want to talk about today.
That's crazy.
I want to talk about dead people and the fact that they're getting money from the federal government. In fiscal year 2023 alone, this is just 1 year, our government
I was going to say, who authorized it? Shit.
sent $1.3 billion. Not $1.3 million. We sent $1.3 billion in checks to dead people. Those aren't my numbers.
Crazy.
Those numbers come from the Office of Management and Budget. That's just 1 year. Not only is the federal government sending checks to dead people, those checks are being cashed. Now, I have heard, Mr. President, of dead people voting, but cashing the checks, you don't have to be God's perfect.
I think this is why we need DOGE, Department of Governmental Efficiency. That is not efficient what we got on the floor right now.
Idiot to realize that there's fraud happening with respect to all this money. Here's how this problem arises. When you die in America, your name is sent to the Vital Records Office in your state.
Now, who run that? See what I'm saying?
And at that point, the Social Security Administration pays each state to get an ongoing list of deceased Americans in that state. So far, so good. The Social Security Administration takes this data, this list of deceased people,
Another scam.
and they compile on an ongoing basis a list called the Death Master File. The Death Master File. That's just a list of everybody, updated daily, of people in the United States who are deceased. Why does the Social Security Administration do this? Well, so the SSA, Social Security Administration, can stop sending people who have died checks. So far, so good. There's just one problem.
This is an urgent message for every American.
Nah, ain't no so far so good. These people tripping.
Due to recent events involving the healthcare CEO,
So far, so good. There's just one problem. I discovered this about 7 years ago. The Social Security Administration refuses to share that list with anybody else in the federal government.
What?
They won't share it with any other federal agencies,
Man,
many of which send out checks.
that means some of that.
The Department of Treasury, for example, sends out checks. SSA won't share the information with them. The Small Business Administration sends out a lot of checks. The Social Security Administration has a list of all deceased Americans, but SSA will not share that information with the SBA.
Who in the SSA?
I'll give you some examples. You remember, Mr. President, when we were in the coronavirus crisis, so we had an economic meltdown, we sent stimulus checks to Americans to try to keep the economy on its feet. We paid $1.4 billion to dead people, and they cashed the checks. The Paycheck Protection Program, which was a part of our stimulus program, paid out $38 million alone to dead people.
Who cashed the check?
These were people who were using, not people, obviously, who were using dead people's Social Security numbers to collect payments. The COVID-19 Economic Disaster Injury Disaster Loan Fund, another culprit, was involved in sending checks to dead people. The Department of Veterans Affairs, and I'm not blaming them, in many respects it's not their fault. A couple of years ago, a scam artist stole the Social Security number of a deceased veteran, and received about $825,000 in checks from 1997 to 2024.
Wow.
Now, the person committing this fraud was just quietly accepting the checks. Somehow, the Department of Veterans Affairs, and for some reason, stopped sending that person the checks. So the fraudster just picked up the phone and called the Department of Veterans Affairs. He impersonated the dead person and convinced them to start sending the checks again. Again, not necessarily the fault of the Department of Veterans Affairs. The VA didn't know that the Social Security number belonged to a deceased person. Another example, a person in Ohio was able to collect her deceased mother's Veterans Affairs benefits for 48 years. 48 years
Can't get
before
that
she was
back.
caught. The truth is, Mr. President, it's sort of like saying, being asked, you didn't go fishing on Saturday. How many fish do you think you didn't catch? We don't know how much money we're sending out every year. to dead people. Let me give you an example of how screwed up the data is, Mr. President. This is a strong indicator of what's wrong. The Social Security Administration, if you ask them, will tell you that there are, according to their records, there are 6.5 million Americans living today in America who are 112 years of age or older.
Dang.
They say there's
That's
6.5 million Americans